Hey everybody, getting ready for a Steady Horse live session. I'm going to wait a few moments, see if a couple people join in on the feed here, and we'll get started in just a little bit. If you go ahead and pop in, just make sure you say hello, tell us where you're from, and that way I know I'm not all alone here. So when we start today, we're going to be going over a bunch of questions that have been submitted via email. These are questions that members of the Steady Horse Video Club submit for me to answer. And typically, I answer a lot of these questions on a daily basis through email, but now we've started on a weekly basis, at least taking a handful of those questions and answering them on here. So I'm excited to get to that in just a little bit. Let's see, Stephen Smith, welcome. How you doing, man? I see Kathy David, howdy. Leanne, hey Leanne. And Alicia, hi Alicia. Stephen Smith, you're still from Missouri. That is great. One of these days you're going to say you're from Texas, so that'll be good. Awesome. Hey Kate, how are you? Kate's from Wisconsin. Welcome, Kate. Great, great. See people getting logged in here, so that is absolutely awesome. We had a pretty cloudy day today, and we were doing a lot of filming at the ranch today, and we got a lot of new content filmed that I'm super excited about. Luke was in town, and he was helping record quite a bit of stuff, and then my brother Peter is actually here too, and he was helping to record some stuff, so we're super, super excited to get some of that additional content out. And then also, while I'm waiting, just so a lot of people know, is we're making a lot of changes to the Steady Horse Video Club, which are going to be so cool. I think people are going to be really excited when it's finally all done and unveiled. Luke's been working pretty hard at adding some new features and some neat things that I think are going to help with people's training and moving forward with their horses. Let's see who else we got here. We have Melissa Williams. Hi, Melissa. Welcome. Welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We got quite a few people joined in here. But one of the first things I wanted to address, many of you know that last week we had a lot of controversy with a particular member, and a lot of people had issues with some things that they found on that member's personal Facebook page. And so it got kind of heated. A lot of people were calling for this particular person to be banned because they didn't agree with some of the practices and things that they did. And I'm just going to be kind of straight up here, is there were some things when I looked on this person's Facebook page that I disagree with. And there are a lot of other members as well. When I happen to look at their personal Facebook pages, I'll find stuff that I find either offensive or egregious, whatever the case might be. But it doesn't matter, honestly, as long as they're subscribing to the rules and regulations that we have on our Facebook page. And that's the most important thing, because the Steady Horse Facebook group is meant for people to learn, for people to grow. And the only way we do that, if we can have a place where people can come together and share their ideas, and we can grow from that. So it doesn't mean we need to agree with everyone and the way that they do things. And I can't have any control over what someone does on their personal Facebook page, but what we do have control over is how we discourse and talk amongst each other on the Steady Horse group. And that's something that I'm so proud of, because everyone in this group does such a phenomenal job of, one, encouraging each other and making sure that we're fair to our horses. And let's be honest, like, we've all made mistakes with our horses before. I can honestly tell you that I've come a long way in my journey from when I first started with horses, and some of the things that I learned and I was taught to do, even by some mentors that I really respect. There were some things that I was encouraged to do that honestly I'm not proud of. And so it's been a process and a journey for me to kind of retrain myself and rethink of the way that I deal with horses. But at the time, when I was doing certain things, I thought that that was the right thing to do. And so we all have our journey, and we're all in different places. And that's why Steady Horse is here, because we never get it perfect, right? And eventually, we hope to get better and better every day. So, so that's where I am with that. And I'm not going to spend much time with that, but I do want to go ahead and get into our questions in just a little bit. But before we do that, I want to do a shout out. I want to do a shout out to Alicia Neighbors. Alicia Neighbors posted an awesome video earlier in the week. And it was a video of her, and she was teaching her horse to stand still. And she posted that video. She put herself out there, and she showed her progress with her horse. And the progress that she was making with her horse was phenomenal. And let me tell you, because I'm always posting videos and I'm getting feedback from people, it's no small thing to put yourself out there, because everybody has an opinion on what you're doing. And when I saw that, the feedback and the encouragement she got looked incredible. And so, Alicia Neighbors, I just want to, my hat's off to you, because I really, really appreciate the fact that you kind of let us get a peek into your journey with your horse, and that you were able to share the progress that you've been making with your horse. So that's awesome, Alicia. I really appreciate that, and I'm excited for the work and the progress that you and Hondo are making. And you guys look absolutely phenomenal, by the way. So big shout out to Alicia. And I want to encourage anybody else, like, post videos of your progress with your horse, because all of us are able to benefit from that, and we're all able to learn from each other the more we can see how each other is working with their horses and the progress that you're making. So again, Alicia, thank you very, very much. Okay, so I want to go ahead and get right into the questions. And what we're going to do is, and I want to say howdy, Donna. I see that you just signed on there. Howdy, Donna. What we're going to do is I'm going to dig into some of these email questions. And then right after that, if anybody has any additional questions that you'd like me to address, we can go ahead and do so. So my first question is from Ellen. And Ellen says, hi, just wondering if there is any more I can do to make a new horse settle into its new home after that initial change of environment and people. Thanks. So that's a really good question, Ellen. You know, whenever we get a new horse, you know, you're always nervous, making sure that they settle in, that they get along with the other horses, the environment, and all of that. And I always recommend, if you're getting a new horse in that you're introducing to your herd, I think it's really important to kind of separate that horse from those other horses at first. A couple of things. One, that kind of gives that horse a little bit of a quarantine period. You know, you never know what horses are taking or bringing when they're coming from different places and what kind of environment it's been in. But also, it helps them to kind of get acclimated into the environment before they're introduced to those new horses. Now, not everybody has the benefit to have a pen that's secluded where you can keep that horse for a little bit. But if you do, I definitely encourage that. Then what I encourage is, one by one, like, bringing your horses over and introducing your horses to that new horse. That way they get an opportunity to get to know each other. They can do it in a controlled environment where you can pull that horse back if things get a little bit aggressive, but at least that initial contact, it's kind of supervised, and you can kind of direct the flow of how that goes and try to set them up so that they have a good initial meeting with each other. From that point on, you know, I think it's really important after they go through that initial kind of separation period to slowly add them into the herd. Maybe you can turn them out for a little bit, see how they interact, and then put them up, and then every day maybe let them interact a little bit longer and longer until you feel comfortable that they've kind of integrated with your herd. So those are things that I feel are really, really important. Now, I'm one of these guys that believes that, you know, let the horses duke it out. And, you know, there are exceptions. You know, sometimes some horses can be super aggressive, you know, pin a horse in a corner and just start kicking the crap out of it. Of course, you'd want to intervene and separate them so that they don't get hurt. But for the most part, these horses, they're going to work things out with each other. So there might be a couple scuffles and things like that. And I know we have all these little mini heart attacks when we see things going on. But for the most part, they work themselves out. And we're better off making sure that we introduce them in large open spaces and areas where if somebody's a little bit aggressive, the other horse can move away. You know, you don't want to do this in a small pen where they could get cornered or hurt, or there's objects that they can run into, right? So we want to make sure that we set them up to be as safe as possible. So, Ellen, I hope that answers your question. But that was a really good question, because I know a lot of us get anxiety whenever we are introducing a new horse. Okay, so let me go ahead and go to another question here. I've got a question from Becky, and she says, and it's kind of a similar-ish question. It says, how long does it take a horse to settle in? He is a 10-year-old gelding and still spooks at silly things. I lack confidence. Could I be causing the spooks? So this is a really good question, because a lot of us have horses that we work with or we deal with where sometimes, you know, you're not 100% confident with that horse, okay? And whether it's a horse that spooks or bolts or takes off, for some reason or another, in the back of your head, you kind of have that nagging deal that, you know, I just don't trust that horse. Now, that thing, that nagging thing, that's a good thing, okay? And so I don't consider that lack of confidence. I consider that really good sense, because that helps you to be a little bit more alert. But here's the thing. We need to be able to train our bodies to be alert, but at the same time, to be nice and relaxed. Because when we're too high on alert, what happens is we transfer that energy to our horse. And then, you know, if I'm on alert and I'm nervous, then my horse is like, oh, wow, what is he nervous about? Is there something to be nervous about? Now I'm going to be nervous, right? And so it's this endless cycle, this feedback loop where we're excited, our horse gets excited, and that excites us, and so on and so forth. And so what you want to do is, yes, be prepared, use good sense when you're handling that horse, but take those nice big deep breaths, rub and love on that horse, go through some of the gradual desensitizing exercises so that you can slowly increase his confidence and get him to understand that when he's with you, that he's in a good, safe place. Now, as far as how long it takes a horse to settle in, it's going to depend on the horse and also the frequency with which you're able to work with that horse. So the more you can work with that horse, the better. Absolutely. I encourage working with your horses and interacting with them as much as possible. However, understand that this isn't an overnight thing. You know, when you're gradually desensitizing, it's going to take a little bit of time. Now, some horses are going to take to it a lot faster. And I'm going to give you a couple of keys or I guess tips that'll help you to get that horse desensitized a little bit faster. So one, make sure that you are releasing the pressure at the right time. Sometimes we wait too long to release the pressure. We're not rewarding our horse soon enough. And the quicker you reward your horse, the sooner they begin to understand that they're making the right choice. So for example, if you're desensitizing your horse with a plastic bag and you're waving it all over the place, and then that horse just stands nice and still, immediately take that pressure away. Take a deep breath, rub and love on that horse. Let them know that they've made a really good decision by standing still, right? Okay, so it might not even mean that, you know, they lower their head and they take a deep breath and they're just chill and relaxed. But if you see a little bit of improvement, go ahead and reward that behavior so that your horse understands that they're on the right track. So tip number 2 is make sure that you do all types of desensitizing. So when you go through the gradual desensitizing course in the Steady Horse Video Club, you'll see that there's desensitizing in motion. If you have the desensitizing for confidence course, you'll see that there's all types of different, from advanced desensitizing to desensitizing in motion to basic desensitizing. There's all types of desensitizing exercises that you can do, and I recommend that you do those various exercises. And then, of course, don't forget the flag work desensitizing videos and the tarp work desensitizing videos, because you want to expose them to a lot of different types of desensitization. You know, a lot of times we just desensitize the same way every day. You know, we'll slide it over his withers and make sure he's okay. And our horses get patterned. And you don't want your horse to be patterned. You want your horse to have a level of intelligence that they realize that regardless what the situation is, that you are going to see them through it and you're going to be an outstanding leader for them. And when you do that for your pony's going to be better off because of it, okay? And then lastly, don't quit too soon. A lot of people quit with the desensitizing way too early. They might start and then they say, oh, this horse is never going to relax, and then they stop and they start adding a pressure in another area, or they try to decrease the pressure. If you start desensitizing, stick with it until that horse make some progress. Only when that horse makes progress are you going to take the pressure away. Now, you're going to use your judgment. If you add too much pressure initially and that horse is losing its mind, then you'll take some pressure away, but not all of the pressure. Take some away so that that horse is in a safe situation. And then as it progresses and gets better, then take the pressure completely away. So I hope that makes sense, Becky. That was a really, really good question, though. Okay, so Patricia has a question here, and it says, I recently bought an 18-year-old gelding that is very hard-mouthed, very hard to rein. He balks. I can manage to get him moving, but it's very tiring trying to get him to move around. I was told that kids have rode him most of his life. I think he has learned to be bullheaded as a matter of survival, I'm sure. Any suggestions on where to begin to get him back to reining? Thank you. Okay, so that's a really good question. So she says she has a hard mouth horse. The folks said that kids used to ride him, and then also says that he's bullheaded, okay? So I guess stubborn, right? And she has a hard time trying to get his feet to move. So believe it or not, that sounds like an awesome kid's horse, right? Because, you know, kids are plow reining in that horse's mouth, and they're pulling that horse's mouth all around. So what happens is these horses become desensitized to that, right? Or sometimes they're in that horse's mouth all the time. They're not really letting up, okay? His feet are hard to move. That's a good thing for a kid's horse, though, because you don't want a horse that's taking off, okay? So you find that horses that are suitable and make great kids' horses don't make such good horses for more experienced horse people, right? And so it can get frustrating if you're kicking this horse and adding pressure and this horse isn't moving out for you, okay? And so here's what I want you to understand is that horse is just doing what he's been trained to do inadvertently. He's been asked to be quiet, and if he just turned that face everywhere those kids were pulling his nose, that horse would lose its mind. So it's kind of been desensitized to all that excess pressure. So he's not necessarily being bullheaded. He might be a little bit lazy, sure. But what we need to do is go back and train this pony to operate in the way that you want him to operate. And so that means going back to some of the basics. Right now you're talking about him reining, neck reining, throw that out the window. Like, that's not even in the equation right now. We need to go back to teaching him how to direct rein, nice and quiet. And so you'll start, say if you pick up on that rein, okay, and you start to tip that nose and get him to move, you want your pony to move nice and quiet with you as you ask him to move. And if he's not moving, if he's kind of bracy, what you'll do is you'll just hold pressure until he actually gives. And once he gives, you'll immediately release that pressure to let him know he did a good job, even if it's just a slight step in the right direction. So we need to go back and build on the fundamentals. So I definitely recommend that you look at my basic mounted maneuvers course, because I talk about how to move that horse's front end, their back end, and get them moving off of that rein pressure light and subtly. I think that's going to help you a lot as far as that's concerned. And then as far as him being lazy, you know, we need to work on that go forward cue. And a lot of times people will tell me, my horse doesn't move out. You know, he's so lazy. And I ask them to show me how they ask that horse to move. And they get on that horse and they're squeezing and kicking and kissing, and that horse isn't moving out. Well, make sure that you are very specific in your escalation of cues. And what I mean by that is when you first ask your horse to walk out, what you're going to do is you'll squeeze with those upper legs, right? You'll squeeze and add pressure. And then if he doesn't move off of that, you might add pressure with your calf and then your heel. And that's all going to be within like the time frame of a second, okay? At the end of that second, if he hasn't moved out, go ahead and kiss at your horse and give him a little kiss. And if your horse is really, really, really lazy and sticky and not moving those feet, you can get yourself a little crop and add some pressure and give him a tap in order to get him to move out. But the important thing is that you use those escalation of cues. Start with that light cue of just squeezing gently with your legs and then gradually increasing that cue. And of course, the moment he takes even one step forward, release the pressure so your horse understands that they did a good job by moving forward. If you're consistent with those cues and you really stick with it and repeat over and over again, letting them know that when they walk out, you'll take the pressure away, and you make it very clear. Good big release of the pressure, Don't hold those legs tight up against him. Loosen those legs up, let him move out. Release your hand pressure. Make sure you're not holding him back too far in his mouth, and encourage him and praise him whenever he walks forward. Eventually, he'll start to move out a little bit quicker for you. But remember that escalation, squeeze, get him moving, kiss at him if you need to, and then tap him if you have to in order to push him forward. So I hope that helps, Patricia. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to a couple of questions that are in the group. But before I do that, I just wanted to say hello to a couple more of y'all. I see Sheila from Hawaii. Howdy, Sheila. How you doing? And let's see, Kristen. Hey, Kristen. And Kristen, you're here in Texas. Howdy, neighbor. And Alicia, you made it. We gave a shout out to you earlier. And again, thank you so much for posting that video and sharing with us your progress with Hondo. And Hondo is a very handsome fella. And then let's see, Mary Alice. Howdy, Mary. Melissa Williams from Texas. Again, we got a lot of Texans here this evening. We got Adele from Buffalo. Hey there. And Doris Little. Good evening, Doris Little. Good evening to you. And Stacy. How are you, Stacy? Welcome again. Good to see you, Stacy. Okay. So I'm going to go right into some of these chat questions that y'all have posted. And so let's see. This one says, what if the horse starts bucking after you ask to move out? And this is from Kristen. Kristen, that's a really good question. Well, here's the first thing. Is if I have a horse that I know pitches or bucks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lot of groundwork with them first. And specifically when I say groundwork, I want to make sure that they're sending out. And when I talk about sending, it's a little bit different from lunging. It's making their feet move with purpose, okay? And so when I ask my pony to move out, I want him to walk, trot, canter, okay, when I ask him to. And I also want him to do good downward transitions. When I take a deep breath, I want him to go from a canter down into a trot. When I take a deep breath at the trot, I want him to go from a trot down into the walk, okay? And so I'm looking for those things in my horse. And sometimes what will happen is if you have a cold back horse or a young horse or just a horse that hasn't had a whole lot of the groundwork and riding done, they might pitch and buck, okay? And if they start to pitch and buck, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep doing these transitions. If he starts pitching when I send him into a trot, I'll just let him trot out and pitch a little bit, and then I'll breathe him back down into a walk, then I'll ask for the trot again. Then I'll ask for the canter, then I'll bring him back down to the trot. So what happens is a lot of times when these horses start bucking, we start focusing on that negative behavior. And that's one of the worst things we can do. Instead of focusing on that negative behavior, what we need to do is replace that behavior. And so what I would do is I would replace that behavior with these transitions. Okay, you want to buck, let's put you into the canter. Let's take you back down to the trot. Let's breathe you down to the walk. Let me turn you in. Let me as you move out. And you'll hear other clinicians that'll tell you things like, get after that horse and move his feet and change directions with that horse back and forth and make him move and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's necessary. I think that these horses are a lot smarter than sometimes we give them credit for, but sometimes they have anxieties and issues that they need to work through. And what happens is when we start pacing our horses and going through these transitions, we're helping to take their mind off of whatever that anxiety is and helping them to focus on us instead. Because I want my horse to realize that I'm going to give him really good leadership. And so if he takes the time to listen to what I'm asking him to do, and I start to develop that focus more on me, he'll stop worrying so much on whatever is frightening him, whatever is making him think that he needs to buck. Because a horse that bucks is simply a horse that doesn't trust you. And that's what that means. A lot of people don't want to admit that, but that's just the truth. If your horse is bucking, he's saying that I'd much rather buck and kick and run and do all of this stuff than do whatever it is that you're asking me to do. Because I don't trust that what you're asking me to do is in my best interest. But when I start doing those transitions upward and downward and breathing, and the breathing is so huge, taking those nice big deep breaths when we're riding our horses and doing those transitions, they begin to understand that we're giving them opportunities to rest. Yes, we might bring the pace up and ask them to move out, but then we kind of dial it back and give them an opportunity to settle down. And they really begin to appreciate the fact that we're being fair, that we're being methodical, and that we're being thoughtful about the way and the manner in which we ask them to move their feet. So once he was good on the ground and he's not bucking on the ground, only then would I get on my horse and ride it and start doing those transitions under saddle. Listen, I tell people all the time, steady horse training is boring. I am not about the drama and the showmanship and the rodeos and all of that. I've got a family and I've got 3 kids and my beautiful wife that I've got to feed and take care of, and I cannot afford to get hurt. And so when people bring in their horses for me for training, the first thing I do is I take them through the groundwork first, because I do not want to hit the ground. And I'm a lot less likely to hit the ground if I work through a lot of this junk on the ground first, and then I climb up in the saddle and I work them through the paces, because then they're already confident that I have their best interest at heart. So there's a really good question. That's something that a lot of people come across, especially a lot of quarter horses can be called back. And, you just want to take them through, work them through it in a way that's fair, not just building up that excitement and getting after them, but doing those transitions to help to settle their mind and make them trust you a little bit more. Okay, so let's see, a couple more hellos. I want to say hi to Kathy from Kansas City. Welcome, Kathy. Glad that you're enjoying this. So I'm going to go to another chat question. Let's see here. I have one from before I do that. So Donna Holmes Frederick, Donna says, how do you separate 2 horses? I ain't getting between 2 fighting horses. Absolutely. I agree with you. You don't want to get between these 2 fighting horses. So if you have 2 horses that are fighting, hopefully you have something handy that you can use. Like I always have a steady stick handy all the time. I've got one in my barn, I've got one in my feed room, by my round pins, by the arena. I'd grab one of those steady sticks, start whacking the ground, hitting the ground, kissing at them. Just create a lot of pressure so that they disperse, okay? Don't get in between them, but add some pressure so that they disperse, and so that you can kind of get them to move away from each other. And then when they move away from each other, you can go grab one of those horses and separate them in a safe manner. So that's a really good question. Yes, definitely don't get between 2 fighting horses. You're not going to make it. It's not going to be good. So let's see. We have Adele who says, why does my horse get mad when he sees the bridle? So some horses, right, you show them that bridle and they grit their teeth, okay? Or maybe they'll take their head and they'll start like just kind of trying to toss you with their head. And so that, a lot of this stuff is when we try to figure out why a horse does something. I mean, at best it's guesswork, right? But based on history and other experiences, sometimes we can come up with some pretty close assumptions as to what's going on. So in these types of situations, usually it's a horse that maybe has had an issue bridling, or maybe even has had an accident with bridling, which is a lot more common than most people might realize. Or maybe it's just never had good bridling experiences at all, okay? And so there's a way to bridle a horse properly, and this is something that I probably need to make a video on, because I don't know that I have a video showing how to properly bridle a horse. And this is a real common issue that I see. And what happens sometimes is when we're taking off the bridle, we might clank that horse's teeth, and it's really uncomfortable, and horses will sit back. Another thing is if you put a bridle on a horse that's too small, right, and then that horse gets sored up, that can be an issue as well, and that happens more often than people might think. Or if people overbit their bridles, and that's another really common issue. A lot of people use a whole lot more bit than they need, way too much. And then if you don't have the right hands or the knowledge to use that bit, you can really sore up that horse's mouth and hurt that horse. And so these are all issues that I see time and time and again that are more often than most of us might think. So here's what I recommend. If you have a horse that really doesn't want to be bridled and gets upset when you try to bridle him, I recommend starting with just a simple O-ring snaffle, okay? And I recommend taking it nice and slow. See if you can get that bridle on, and when they get that bridle on, rub and love on that horse. You can even give that horse a treat if he's really bad. Now, really important, because I don't recommend treating horses all the time, but in some extreme situations, or for certain types of training, it's appropriate. But a lot of times people give way too many treats. So I'm always careful when I say to treat a horse. But if he takes that bridle, give him a treat. Or a lot of people will give him a treat and then slip that bridle in as you're giving him a treat, and that works well too. And then just rub and love on him while he has that bridle on, and make it a good thing for him. And so I'd recommend, once he stands nice and still, if he's not tossing his head, if he seems comfortable with that bridle, then go ahead and slip him out, and that's it. You're done with that training session. And then to continue to work on those things to get that horse to do better. But it's a process that takes time if you have a horse that's really adamant about not taking that bridle and getting upset when they see that bridle. Okay, so I've got another couple. I want to say a couple more hellos to some of y'all. Diane Carlson, howdy, from Minnesota. And then we have Frankie Young. Good evening, Frankie Young, to you as well. And Sheila, howdy, Sheila. And Regina, how you doing, Regina? Good to see you this evening. Okay, so I've got another chat question here. And this is from Mary Alice Owens-Burrows-Smith. And it says, how to desensitize a horse that was previously mistreated. This is a really good question. I get asked similar questions like this a lot, especially in steady horse, have rescue horses, right? And some of these horses have gone through some really abhorrent situations, really bad situations. And you're always worried, about that past trauma and how that affects how they're doing and the future training, right? And so we want to be really sensitive to the fact that some of these horses have gone through hell. I mean, they've gone through some really difficult things, and that's a shame, and that's sad, and that's terrible. However, we've got to move forward. And what I mean by that is it's so important not to baby these horses. As hard as it is, we want to love and rub on them and baby them, and we feel so bad for what they've gone through. But the best thing for a lot of these horses is to treat them like a regular horse, to have regular expectations for them, and give them the opportunity to prove themselves that they can overcome whatever fears, anxieties, trust issues that they have. And the best way to do that is to be gradual, okay? So you're still going to apply the same methods, the same training. You're going to do the desensitizing, but you're going to take it maybe just a touch slower. You're going to make sure that you're going to start with something light. So, for example, before you go to using a flag or a sack on a horse that's really reactive, that's had maybe an abusive past and has been mistreated, just start with your hand. Really, just go with your hand and rub and love on that pony and rub it all over his body, and then flail your hand up and down on the side to make sure they're okay with that. And then maybe you can progress with just a steady stick, and just without even the string on there, just rubbing and loving with that, and then eventually with the string. So you're going to be really thoughtful and creative about how you introduce things to them. And that way, you're going to set them up to be successful and to trust you, because we all know that that's the key, is that we've got to develop trust with our horses. And the best way to develop trust is by making sure that we're setting them up to do well. Every time we set them up to do well and they have a positive experience, they're going to trust you that much more. So that's my recommendation. Take it nice and slow, take it easy, but don't overdo it. Don't baby these horses, because they need to grow and expand, and we need to stretch and grow them, and it's for their own good that we do so. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so Alicia Neighbors, you have a good question here that I see on here. It says, Hondo is very reactive with his sides, and I'm trying to teach him to be able to steer by leg pressure, as I have to drop reins for archery. That's pretty cool, by the way, the archery that you do. When I saw your video, I checked out your Facebook profile, and I saw that you do archery. on Hondo. Really, really, really cool. That's super impressive. It says, what groundwork would aid here and then transfer to the saddle? Awesome. Really good question. I love it. So when it comes to, and I mean, you're spot on, because all the groundwork directly translates to the work that we do in the saddle, right? And so when it comes to the groundwork, one of the things for steering, a really good place to start is teaching that horse to move the forehand, okay? And so if you watch the videos on moving your horse's forehand or getting them to step over, moving that front end, you'll see that you start holding that lead rope, you know, and you kind of add a little bit of pressure at their forehand, and then you take your stick and you add pressure at the forearm to add pressure, okay? And you'll ultimately want that horse to cross one foot over to move over. So it's gonna cross over and move over, okay? So eventually you can move where you're giving that cue from. You can slide the stick just maybe in front of the girth where your foot would hang when you're riding your horse, and you can apply that same pressure by your foot. And you don't even have to use your stick. You can use your thumb, you can use your fist, you can just gently apply pressure by the girth, and then you can follow up by either tapping on that front end lightly to get him to move over. And then eventually he'll begin to associate that pressure where your leg is with what you're asking with your stick and following through with. So it's kind of a gradual escalation, but it's going to translate directly into saddle. And you can go ahead and put a leg on him, add that pressure, and he'll eventually start to move under saddle. Now, when you're under saddle and you're asking him to move with your legs, until he gets it, you're always going to reinforce with your reins if you need to. But eventually, he'll begin to understand that you're asking him to move off of that leg pressure. And if he moves off that leg pressure, you immediately, of course, take the pressure away. And we all know that horses are really good at searching for the release of pressure. So if we add pressure and release it properly, he's going to learn how to use your legs as a guide to move left, right, stop, all those things. So I hope that helps. So I would definitely start with the moving the forehand, moving the front end over on the ground, and then translating that into the saddle. Okay. So I do have one more email question that I need to answer. So this is from Deanna, and it says, my horse always lays his ears back at me when I ask him to do something. I can ask him to move his back end from the ground, but I have to use a ton of pressure just to get him to move. He can be so pushy, and he tries to run over me all the time. What should I do? So this is kind of like a question we had earlier. This is a lazy horse, okay? And lazy horses can also be really pushy. And when you have a horse that pins their ears back, I call them penny horses. They just kind of pin those ears back all the time. Those penny-eared horses, they're lazy and they can have bad attitudes, okay? And so she says that she can ask him to move his back end from the ground, but it requires using a lot of pressure just to get him to move. So here's what I recommend. First of all, you need to make sure that this horse is backing away from you really well. So do a lot of backing up, getting him to respect your space when you ask him to move away from you. And it's not about the stuff that you see, you know, where you're going to whack on that horse and get him to move out of your space, but it is about being assertive and holding your ground. And so when I ask my horse to back up, I might, and there's a number of ways you can ask your horse to back up, but say you're just shaking that lead rope, okay? And say he's not backing up. Well, then you can shake that lead rope a little bit harder, and he's not backing up. Then shake it a little bit harder. And this would have all been done within just a span of a couple of seconds. I'm going to quickly escalate so he knows, hey, I'm pretty serious here. I need you to move out of my space. Move out of my space now. And I'd keep backing him up until either one, you know, he started to soften and creep out of your space, or those ears started to perk back up again, and he was just laying them flat. Now, there's some horses that just tend to have their ears kind of pitched backwards, but it's these horses that lay their ears flat up against the side of their necks. Those are the ones that are pretty penny-eared horses, okay? The other thing is about moving that hind end is make sure you're very clear in the way that you communicate. So when you escalate your cues, make sure you escalate them in the same place at the same time every time, okay? So for example, if you're asking him to move that hind end, start with just kind of orienting yourself and looking at that hind end, see if he'll move it. If not, you can pick up your steady stick and then kind of start to bring it in towards him and wave at the air around that area to see if he'll move. And then if he doesn't, you can take your steady stick and gently give him a tap, all right? But you want to make sure that you do that escalation, starting nice and soft, then gradually increasing the pressure as is necessary to get him to move, and make sure that you're consistent. A lot of people don't like tapping their horses. Sometimes you need to tap your horse in order to get their attention. I'm not saying that you're going to whack at him with everything you got, but you're going to give him a nice solid tap so that you get his attention. And here's the thing about those taps is the firmer and the more direct that first tap is, you're going to have to do a whole lot less tapping in the future, okay? So what ends up happening is a lot of people end up nagging at their horses, and they just do like these light little, oh, let me tap you, I want you to move away. No. If he's really not minding you and he's being pushy, you tap that horse. Get out of my space. Move that hind end around, but immediately let it go. Once he moves, take a deep breath. Don't hold on to any anger, any malice. Don't make it a personal thing. Don't get upset at that horse, but tap him, get him to move, let it go back to rubbing and loving on him, let him know he did a good job. So if we're a little bit more clear in our body language and more concise with the way that when we need to, we get after him and say, hey, sir, you need to move out of my way, he's going to begin to respond to you a lot better and a lot more consistently. Okay, so let's see here. I think that's it for all of the questions that I have here. I'm just running through to make sure that I didn't miss anything, but looks like I got it all, or at least for the most part. One of the things that I wanted to just share with you guys really quick is that I really believe that our horses are a gift from God. And I think that it's a privilege for each and every one of us to have the horses that we have. And I think that sometimes we take it for granted. And I know I do sometimes. I'm working with horses every day on a daily basis. And throughout the year, I'll literally see over 1,000 horses. And it's crazy how blessed I am to be able to work with these horses all of the time. And so I just want to encourage you, don't take that for granted. Don't forget that it is such a blessing to be able to work with these animals every day. And we are a real special part of the population that have that blessing, because most people don't have that opportunity in this day and age. And so when you're out there with your horse and you're spending time with them, spend a little bit of extra time, rub and love on those horses and let them know that they've done a good job. I just want to remind you, because our horses are not here with us forever, and they are so fragile. And, we could wake up tomorrow and you have a colic case or whatever, and that horse is gone. Really, really take the time to enjoy every opportunity you have with your horse. And when you do that, when you consider each interaction and every opportunity a blessing, it really puts things in perspective. Sometimes we can get frustrated when things in our training don't move as quick as we need them or want them to. But remember, we want to have well-trained horses, but there's so much more to it than just that. I think it's about enjoying the opportunity to love these creatures in the best way we possibly can. So I just want to say thank you all for for tuning into this and checking this out with our Facebook Live. And I really appreciate everyone that submitted questions. We'll be doing another one of these next week, so I look forward to those. And again, keep posting videos, keep engaging, and I just pray that God protects you guys as you work with your horses, and that your horses will be healthy and do really, really great. Y'all have a great evening.